This recording is going to go over fraction multiplication part A within Unit 3 of the Math Plus Yellow program. As you can see, fifth graders begin to compute with fractions. They begin multiplying and dividing. They also will add and subtract fractions that have unlike denominators. Third graders began to learn about fractions and how to compare fractions and just learning about what the difference is in a numerator and a denominator. And I'm going to get out my document camera here just to show you a little bit about what third graders needed to know, so that if you need to review fractions a little bit, you can kind of go back to third grade skills. So if we have a fraction such as 1/3 and a fraction such as 1/4, how would we know which one was bigger? What we want students to realize is that when we have one of 3 pieces or one of 4 pieces, that the pieces get smaller as the denominator gets larger. So you can see that 1/3 is definitely bigger than 1/4. So 1/3 is bigger than 1/4. The other thing that's important to show them, well, what if we have the denominators the same, and let's say we have 1/4 again, so we have a 2/4 and a 1/4. Well, if we have 2 of the 4 pieces, and you can see they're cut into equal size, the 2 is definitely larger. So we want kids to really focus on if the numerators are the same or the denominators are the same, because it's much easier to compare. We also want students to be able to use a number line. So if we were saying we have 5, 6, and this is moving a little bit more into fourth grade skills, and you can see neither the numerator or denominator are the same, but what if we want to compare them? So what we can also do is think about benchmark numbers such as 0 and 1, those, and then even 1/2 in the middle. But you can see I'm going to put a 1/2 right here in the middle. To make 5, 6 on the number line, we would first need to divide into 6 pieces. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 5 of the 6 would be right here. Now again, I'm going to put my 1/2 and my 0 and my 1. If I wanted 3/4, I would need to divide my number line into fourths, so that I would have 1, 2, 3 of the 4 pieces. And you can see that 3/4 is less than 5, 6. And we also want kids to be able to think about, okay, if something's cut in really small pieces like 6, and you have all but one of the pieces, it's going to be closer to a whole. If something's cut into a little bit larger pieces and you still only have, you need one more, it's going to be a little bit further than this one because the pieces are larger. So it's going to be a little bit further from one than this one. So definitely explore numbers and fractions, and also begin to talk about what it means to have a whole and a fraction or part of a whole, and mixed numbers, as well as an improper fraction, which means that we have this mixed number turned where that we have the larger number on top. The larger number is the numerator and the smaller number is the denominator. Both of these mean the same thing, but they look very, very different. So let's go back to the OLS and begin to explore Lesson A. Now this lesson is going to, again, like I said, start off assuming that your child has mastered some of the basic facts or methods of computing with fractions and just understanding what a fraction is. This first activity talks about simplifying a fraction, and you can see that it talks about the GCF, or greatest common factor. Factors are the multiplication facts. How do you make that number? So what we're going to do is find the facts, and I'm going to turn on my document camera and kind of move this out of the way so we can see the screen at the same time. If we have a fraction 2/10, and I want to know if I can simplify that, I need to think about the factors that make 2. Well, they used a T-chart, so we can try that. I know that 2 can be made with 1, because factors always, or 1 is always a factor of everything, so I'm going to go ahead and put it for both. And then I know that 1 times 2 makes 2. Now, since 10's a little bigger, I'm going to go ahead and put it over here because I know 1 times 10 is 10. So 1 and the number itself are always factors. Then let's see, 2 times 5 is 10. And then in the middle here, I know 3 can't multiply by something to get 10 and 4 can't, so I've kind of closed the gap. So my factors are 1, 2, 5, and 10. And you can see that the least common factor is 2. So when I have 2/10, I can simplify that number or make it smaller. I'm going to find an equivalent fraction. We want students to realize it's really not changing. We're not really making it smaller. We're making the digits smaller, but the fraction size is really staying the same. So if I have 2/10, what I can do is divide by this common factor. And basically what we're doing is taking 2 of 2 pieces. That's the same thing as saying we're dividing by 1. And students know that when you divide or multiply by 1, the value doesn't change. This is the identity property. It keeps the same identity. But if we have 2 divided by 2, we're going to get a 1. And if we have 10 divided by 2, we're going to get a 5. 2/10 and 1/5 are the same amount. And let's draw a circle just to prove that. And this is a great thing for you to do with your student as well. Circles may not be the best thing, but a bar probably will be. So let me go ahead. Circles are kind of hard sometimes, so let's do a bar. And so I'm going to show 2/10. And let's first of all divide it kind of in half. And I'll see if I can make somewhat equal sizes. So I have 2 of the 10, but what that also could equal, whoops, this one's not supposed to be there, is 1/5. So 2/10 is the same size as 1/5. They are equivalent. You can also use fraction equivalent strips. There's apps for that kind of help students visualize what that means. So as you go through that, it is important to help them understand what a factor is, and then when they divide by that factor, making sure that they really understand all you're doing is dividing by 1. 2 over 2 is still 1. You have 2 of the 2 pieces, so that's the entire whole. Now we're going to get into multiplying a fraction by a whole number. The thing that's important to think about is when you are taking 1/3 times 12, you're really saying 1/3 of 12. So encourage your child to take out that multiplication sign and think of. So we want 1/3 of 12. You can show this in a lot of different ways. You can show it with a picture, you can show it with a set, and you can show it with a number line. And that is what we're going to talk about a lot in this unit, and that's what the checkpoint is going to focus on, how to really show taking 1/3 of something or a fraction of something. So you can go through those components. The thing that you will see is that students will need to simplify the fractions before they compute, or otherwise it's going to get really complicated. So as you can see, we've come to the checkpoint, but before we do the checkpoint, I'm going to head over to the student activity book. And this is an example of what I'm talking about, as far as you will see some great problems like this one, 4/5 times 15. But what we want students to think about is, what is 1/5 of 15? And then they can find the 4/5. So I'm going to pull out my document camera again, and I'll draw a number line here. And I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I have my 15 spots here, and I'll add in my numbers. And we definitely want students to pick up their pencils, write in their math journals, use scratch paper so that they can really make sense of this. When they have to add in the increments themselves, it makes a lot more sense. Now, let's look back at this problem. It says 4/5 of 15. But we know with this denominator that we need to divide this number line into 5 equal pieces. 15 divided by 5 means that there's going to be 3 in each. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12. If I want 4 of the 5 pieces, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces now. If I want 4, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. So the answer is 12. If we divide 5 by 15, or 15 by 5 equal pieces, we have 3 in each group, and if we have 4 of those groups, that means we have 12 in all. Now let's look at the next one, because the next one shows 9/12 divided by 20. 9/12 by 20. This is one that you are going to want to simplify. Now, like I said, I don't believe that your student will see something like this on the Georgia milestones, but they possibly could. So when they see larger numbers like this, the first thing we want them to think about is, what are the factors of 9? What are the factors of 12? So again, I can make my T-chart. And I know, like I said, 1's a factor of both. The number itself is a factor of both. So those are givens. So I'm going to see if there's anything else. 2 times something isn't 9. I know 3 times 3 is 9. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. None of those can be multiplied to get 9. So those are my factors of 9. Now let's look at 12. I know that 2 times 6 is 12. And I know that 3 times 4 is 12. I know that 5, that's right here in the middle, can't go into 12 evenly. So I can see that 3 is my least common factor. So now what I can do is simplify 9/12. So I'm going to divide by 1, or 3/3, which means the same thing as 1 whole, just to make my digits a little smaller. It's still going to be equivalent, still going to be the same size and represent the same amount, but I can just write it in a more simplified way. I know 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So now I have 3/4. That is much easier. So now I'm going to multiply simply 3/4 times 20. So we have 3/4 times 20. Making a number line, again, we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Remember, this denominator tells us how many groups, how many equal groups. If I divide 20 by 4, I know there's 5 equal groups. So, and I also know that there's 10 in the middle. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sometimes it helps to make that little middle number, and luckily in the book, all the little increments are already there for you. So if I want to divide this evenly into 4 groups, I have 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 5, 10, 15, 20. There's 4 groups. Then I can do 3 of those 4. 1, 2, 3. So my answer would be 15. So something that seems really complicated really isn't complicated. When we think of the whole, we want it in 4 groups, and we want 3 of those 4 groups. So as you work through Lesson A, you will see a variety of different pictures. Again, 8/12 can be simplified. 3/8 cannot be simplified, but what you can do is I have 16 and they're in 8 groups. So that means there's going to be 2 in each group. And then as we go to the next page of the workbook, you're going to see very similar problems, but without the models. And so what you can do on your own paper is draw your own fraction strips or your own number line. And then this is great too, because just like we talked about, it says, which is another way to think about this problem. Remember we said we have 16 and we've divided it by 4 pieces, but we want 3 of those. So basically what you're saying is we have 3/4 times 16, which is the same as 3 times 16/4. This one right here is exactly the same. So that's not necessarily another way to write the problem. And we don't want to just automatically switch the denominator to the numerator. You can't just make flip-flops. That wouldn't work. But we can say if we have 16 pieces divided by 4 and we want 3 of them, we can rewrite it in that format. Now let's head over to the lesson checkpoint, and what you will see at the end of the unit. This is a checkpoint that you will need to print out and complete. A lot of the visuals are already there, but you will notice it's large numbers. So simplifying and dividing by the common factors is what you're going to need to do first, and it does say simplify the fractions first if needed. So when we simplify 10/16, when I look at my document camera here, when I simplify 10/16, I need to think about what can go into both of those evenly. I know they're both even numbers, so let's try that and divide by 2/2 or 1 whole, and I would get 5/8. 5/8, 10 divided by 2 is 5, 16 divided by 2 is 8. It's much easier to calculate with than 10/16. I might know my multiplication facts by 8, but I definitely don't know them by 16. And it's also important to remember that you can't just divide one number, like the numerator. You have to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same amount. So now we have 5/8 times 24. So if you drew a number line with 24 pieces like they did, and you divided it into 8 equal pieces, and then hop 5 of those 8, where would you land? Here is an array, so we have 25 stars. They're in 5 groups. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would happen? How many would you have if you have 4 of the 5 groups? How many stars would you have in all? Here's one where you can use fraction strips. We have 4 times 1/2. Well, if you have 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, but you only want half of them, how many pieces will you have? Draw a model to show that. And here it says use any method you choose to solve this problem and explain your thinking. I can automatically see that 3/9 can be simplified because I know that 3 and 9 are both divisible by 3. So I could reduce that to 1/3, which would be much easier to calculate with. And then lastly, here's another one. It says use any method you choose to solve this problem. We want 5 times 3/5. So if you have 5 groups, but you only want 3 of the 5, how many are you going to have? And then it says use the new numbers 4, 5, and 35 to write this problem with 2 different factors that result in the product of 28. Now remember, we want to rearrange this a little bit, and you can take that whole and divide it into the equal pieces, which we're only going to think about that denominator, and then multiply it by 4. So you could say, I'm not going to say it, but it was in the homework or the activity guide, how you could rewrite this and move the denominator somewhere else and it still represent the same thing. Just remember, you can't turn a denominator into a numerator and just change the value of the number, because when you change the numerator and the denominator, it means a totally different thing. So once you finish the assessment, your lesson can be marked complete. So, and then next we'll move into fraction lesson B.